one of the problems which needs to be solved meaningfully is governing the state of California, which is a very big problem. It's more of a process. It's more of a management issue. You have to stay at it every day and stick with it every day. And the person who I will be introducing has done this before, and he's had quite a career. I think he would not call it a career so much as he would call it a calling. He has been a mayor. He has been a Secretary of State. He has been head of the State Democratic Party. He's been a presidential candidate. He's been an attorney general, a statesman in general, as well as the governor of California twice. He's also been a seminarian, the Jesuit seminarian, partaking and benefiting from the discipline and education of the Jesuits. He's led delegations to China and the Soviet Union. He's studied Spanish in Mexico, hung out in Mexico for quite some time. He's hung out in Japan, studying Buddhism and Japanese culture. He's worked with Mother Teresa at the Home of the Dying. So he's quite a Renaissance man. He is, as most of you know, a very smart guy, very intellectual. And he has told me, we're just back in there, I was saying, Jerry, he did a great, he has great benefit for the healthcare industry and healthcare community in California on Monday, where he spent 6 hours in Oakland with representatives of the hospital community and a major labor union. And over a 6-hour period, we were able to forge an historic agreement between the two entities about how to get along in the future. And again, it took about 6 hours, so I was kidding him, Jerry, we were there for 6 hours, that's great. And he looked at me and said, Wade, as a Jesuit, I could have been there for 12. I said, okay, he said, I'm better than all you CEOs out there. I said, okay, you guys only pay attention for 45 minutes. But anyway, now he is once again, our governor of the state of California, and he has been at it 2 years. He's already had a dramatic impact on state budget and state financing, which is his #1 priority. He has again raised the issues of clean energy and a clean environment. He's orchestrated a historic realignment of California resources, as we've all been understanding. He is a good leader. And true to our heart here at the Bay Area Council, he is increasingly focusing overseas on economic development and China, bringing China and California closer together. So it is an honor for me not only so that Lloyd doesn't call me up, to introduce, to represent Dignity Health and Lloyd Dean, but also a former boss of mine when I worked for him during the first administration, the governor of the great state of California, Jerry Brown.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that we're able to recycle so many of my old employees. I've recycled several. They're still in my office. We may have to have some couches when they get a little tired in the afternoons, because some are even older than me. And I find that a little hard to get used to, because the first time I was the youngest governor in the 20th century. Now I'm the oldest governor in America. So I always liked opposites. In the 1950s, I spent 4 years in silence and seclusion, having vowed poverty, chastity, and obedience up in the hills of Los Gatos, that white building up there. And I spent a lot of time looking down on your predecessors. But anyway, we would sit there and I would look over this whole plain of Santa Clara Valley. I used to think of this as what the plain of Esdraelon looked like, where the Battle of Armageddon was supposed to take place. Anyway, those were my thoughts. But you know, after a while, that can get tiring. So I left and I immediately enrolled in Berkeley at UC, just in time for the eruption of the student movement. And it was very good to go from authoritarian silence to noisy anarchy. And I embrace both. And as a politician, that's good, because you have to deal with a lot of extremes. So, and since that time, which was 1960, my father was governor, I watched him through 2 terms, and then after an interim period where Ronald Reagan was governor, I then came in for 8 years, and then I am here again. So I've had a chance to see the changes. And politics is always a somewhat nasty business, at least it's also a very exhilarating business and vocation. But it has gotten more difficult, more partisan, more polarized for a lot of different reasons. There is not as much independence on the part of any of the elected officials because the money is collected centrally by the various parties and the various interest groups. So people tend to hew a line. And more than anything, we do need independent thinkers who are willing to get out of their comfort zones and see where the consensus, where the agreement can be forged. Because if there's any challenge to California or to America, it's this inability in time of real mounting economic challenge, could even use that word crisis, to not find the agreement to be able to make tough decisions. And there are a lot of tough decisions to be made. So there's where we are. But just focusing here in California, because I think the theme here is the Great Leap Forward. And I have to say, I don't know who came up with that title. The last Great Leap was done by Mao Zedong, and it preceded the world's greatest famine, and 20 million people were killed. So I'm not into leaps forward. I'd rather take small, incremental steps. And I have to say that these things, you don't leap. This stuff is all around. Everything I'm going to talk about today, I talked about 30 years ago. It's still on the agenda. Pension reform. I talked about a pension reform in 1982. It's in the Budget Act. Said we got to lower these pensions. We need to have a 401k. We had to do other things. I talked about we had a water plan. We had renewable energy. And I created a high-speed rail authority. And I passed a bill in 1978 requiring every school district to raise standards for graduation. All those issues are as live today. So I think you have to think about issues in government not as problems, but as conditions. Not like a chronic condition, but as the human condition. And the human condition, we learn to embrace it. You know, like Nietzsche talked about amor fati, loving our fate. Well, we can transcend it a little bit, but don't think you can escape it. There's a lot of stuff in the context that you find yourself that you're not going to change. But I will say we can do some stuff. Now, we've had a budget mess for a long time. And without pointing any fingers, I do want to underline it was a big mess. $26 billion of mess. I mean, it wasn't anywhere near that bad when I took over from Reagan. Now, that was one movie actor that had a little more luck, because he did have more luck. And I want to underscore luck, because the oil embargo, he didn't create the oil embargo, he didn't end it. But what the oil embargo did, he created a big recession. In the middle of the recession, at the trough, when the state needed all this money, he practically doubled the income tax, the sales tax, and the corporate tax. Huge increases. And you didn't see much. And then by the time the recession ended, as I took over in 75, we thought we were in a big recession. By 76, 77, we had a $5 billion surplus. We had a lot of money. And lucky we did, because Proposition 13 came along and took away about $6 billion. We just had enough to pay it. So it was kind of magic. But again, I didn't create the oil embargo. I didn't create Ronald Reagan. But I sure spent all the money as soon as I got it. I didn't really spend it. Howard Jarvis took it away from me. So we got a budget, $26 billion. We've cut it down pretty good. I had a plan, half cuts, half taxes. Now, when I talk about cutting, I know where some of you probably are, because we've surveyed this very carefully. And the median response when you say, how much waste is there in state government, is 40%. Well, there isn't 40%. I mean, that's just, I assure you. And 40% of what the government spends is on schools. And another significant percent on the university. And then you have Medi-Cal, and you have prisons, and you have pensions for the blind. You got a lot of stuff. So when you cut, That's the stuff you cut. So I said, let's cut half and then not raise taxes, continue the taxes that Governor Schwarzenegger and the legislature voted for. It was about $10 billion. I said, don't even raise the tax. Let the people in June of last year vote either to tax or we'll put in trigger cuts and we'll cut. So I couldn't get it because the minority members will not give a vote even to have a vote on taxes. So we had to have all cuts. And this year now, we're still laboring in this great budget gap that we have. And again, I'm making another proposal, and that is not half cuts this time. Remember, we had billions last year. This time we're going to have about 60 or 65% cuts, and then the rest I propose taxes. But instead of trying to wait for the legislature to give me a 2/3 vote, I've went out and got some signatures. We're putting them in, so we'll put it on the ballot for November. And if that passes, we will have a budget over the next few years that'll be in balance and it'll take care of the basic needs. Now, when we say cut, it's not that easy. We've cut out redevelopment. Probably have a few people in here who like redevelopment. I liked it. I spent redevelopment every penny I could get my hands on when I was mayor of Oakland. But the redevelopment isn't free money. I was always wondering, where the hell did all this money come from? It was kind of magic. You know, you could just reach into the redevelopment pot and spend it on stuff. Hell, we restored the Fox Theater, been kind of like this place, only a little nicer, I think. Well, it is. Well, it's nicer because we spent $75 million. Did you spend that much? I mean, we really had some fine artwork on the ceiling. It took a long time. But that was the redevelopment pot. That comes from the property tax, which would otherwise go to schools and the county hospital and local sheriffs and all the other stuff. So then it's about 12%. So where do you get the 12? Well, you go to the state. Where does the state get it? Well, we invent it through gimmicks, through borrowing, through taking from this, robbing Peter to pay Paul. So we didn't have the money. So we got rid of that. We also came up with realignment. Realignment is the word for having people who commit crimes that are not serious, not violent, or not sexual be handled at the local level. That's what it is. And it has allowed us to cut our state prison budget by 18%. And we're actually reducing personnel by thousands of positions. So that's a good thing. We're not easy. It's the biggest change in prison, in the way the prison's been run in my lifetime. And by the way, we didn't get one Republican vote. So this stuff gets pretty partisan, but it's the way to go. And the U.S. Supreme Court said we had to lower the prisons, and we had to lower the crowding, and we would have had to build more prisons with money we don't have, or we had to do something creative, and that's realignment. So cuts and taxes, they both go together. Now, I hope you'll vote to tax yourself, but if you don't, we have a provision, because we've got to have a balanced budget, automatically cuts will be triggered. And the reason why we do that is we have to be able to go and finance our budget during the summer. In order to finance the budget, it has to be balanced. We're going to assume the taxes, and we have to have a fallback position automatically in the budget if the voters decide to vote no on the taxes. And if they do, then there will be automatic cuts, and those cuts will be pretty darn tough. But you'll be able to see that as we get down the road. But in my opinion, it's reasonable. It's going to take care of things. We cut the university 25%. We don't need to do that anymore. We've cut pensions of the elderly, the blind, the disabled. We don't need to go there any further. So we've cut the courts. We're probably going to cut them some more. We got some even bigger cuts coming in the next few weeks. So we're cutting. We need to supplement it with some revenue, and that's my proposal. Second issue that's always been around, education. I've got a funding formula there. Instead of having these 50 or so categorical programs with different funding streams and auditing and requirements and various kinds of procedures that absorb a lot of administrative cost, we're going to put a formula based on the need in that school district. So where there are a lot of non-English speaking families where the income is much lower, this will adjust and provide more funds accordingly and without any bureaucracy. It's called the weighted student formula, and we're also working on accountability. When I was mayor of Oakland, I started 2 schools, and charter schools have flourished over the last decade. One's a military school, and one's an art school. I like to keep the authoritarian and the anarchist spirit alive and well. And both express that. They're both different, but they're both in downtown Oakland. They're doing very well. I encourage other mayors to do as well. Then we have a pension reform 12-point plan. I won't get into it, but raises the age. I know people can work longer than many people think they can. So we want to raise the age. We want to increase the contributions from the employees. We want to offer an option of a defined contribution as well as a defined benefit. That's going to be a hard sell. We're going to get it, though. And remember, these things have been on the agenda since the first time I was governor. So I don't think it's going to take me 30 years this time. I'll get it done sooner, but I may not get it done quite as quickly as I would like. But it's going to get done. Then water. We had a nice water plan. My father started the first water plan, got most of it done, had one little piece in the Delta that's crucial. If those levees are made out of, earthen levees, if they break in an earthquake, you can cut off the water for the Santa Clara Valley, just like that. We have to ensure water reliability. And I'll unveil a program that's people have been working on for several years. It's going to be controversial, but we're going to push it through. We're going to take care of a water issue that's been kicking around for 50 years. Then energy, the renewable energy. California's already got 20% of electricity from renewable sources, solar, wind, geothermal, other renewable sources. We're going to get to a third by 2020. It's not so easy, but we're going to keep the cost down as best we can, but we're going to be the leader. Certainly we're the leader already, but we can be a world leader in the new technologies. They're small now. Somebody says, well, your green jobs, it can be numbered in the tens of thousands. We need in the millions. Well, you could have said that about the semiconductor industry about the time I started running for office the first time. But it grows, it becomes global. And we know climate change is real. We're going to have to deal with fossil fuels. We need alternatives. We need efficiency. And California is pioneering in every way, meeting an inexorable challenge that, by the way, 98% of the peer-reviewed scientists agree with. It's not that everybody knows exactly what climate change will bring, but we know there's a non-trivial, substantial risk of real catastrophe. And when you have a risk, whether it's fire to your house or flood, you do something about it. And that's really what alternative energy is all about. And it's also good because the price of oil can climb and we can insulate ourselves from that. Californians have saved over $50 billion because of our energy standards in buildings and appliances. The last thing is the high-speed rail. I started the High-Speed Rail Authority in 1982, but it's taken a while to get it going. We still, but think of the cathedral at Chartres. Do you know how long that took? That took about over 100 years. Now, I think we can do it quicker than that. But those guys with their little wheelbarrows carrying those rocks, they weren't just laborers. They were building a cathedral. They were, soaring. Their sense. Okay, let's get back to this leap here. Let's at least open our minds and realize this is Silicon Valley, this is America, this is California. We do have to enlarge our sense of what's possible. And I believe that if 13 other countries around the world can do it, we can do it. And we have the perfect place, north and south, 2 major metropolitan areas, and we've got the initial funding. We've got some sources where we think we can pay for it. It's a big idea, and to me, it's another indicator. Are we on the move? Are we? Some people say we're declining. I think there's a risk of that, but with the resources, the brain power, and the capital, I think we have unspent potential. I know we got all sorts of regulations and taxes and problems, tort lawyers and all the rest, but we still have $2 trillion in GDP. I was governor the last time. Some people would say, God, the business climate's so bad, California is not going to grow anymore. Well, that was 300 billion, 350 billion. Now we're 2 trillion. Last year it went up 90 billion. This year it'll probably go up maybe 70 billion. So there's a lot here. Now it can be screwed up, and we have a lot of people that are just poised to screw it up. I have no doubt about that. But with political will and a little imagination, we may not take a leap, but we will step forward into the future because that's what we've always done before. And I didn't come back here, to screw it up. I came back here to tell you the way I see it, to apply my knowledge and my experience, and do whatever somebody who has thought about it a long time, who's not, has all his faculties for a little while longer, and I'm going to put it to work. And I hope all of you will be sympathetic, vote for the tax, suck it in, or whatever they tell, and go for it. But just realize California has fabulous potential. We have a few major stumbling blocks, but I'll get them out of the way. You just kind of join in, and let's keep California dream right there. I'll just end, by the way, one thing, a Latin saying from Virgil, which is ad astra per aspera, to the stars through the thorns. Thank you.
You answered all the questions. I was just sitting there tearing this thing up.
Figure out some new ones.
I know. Well, here's a new one. You spent a great deal of time back in the 70s learning how to be a governor, and then went on to other offices and broadened your experience. And how do you perceive the difference between the challenges you faced then and the capacity of California to govern itself versus today?
Well, the one big difference is that the personal income of California was growing about 17% in those first years that I was governor. So there's a lot of money flowing in. We didn't realize it because we thought we were still in a recession the first 6 months. There are a lot of Republicans who were moderate. There were a lot of Democrats who were conservative. There was more independence, particularly in the state Senate. We didn't seem like we had a lot of these problems. Now there seem to be real problems. I mean, you heard about the health care, the continuous budget deficit, the radical difference between how the Republicans see the world, how the Democrats see it. So the problems are more real. I think the lack of collaboration is also more evident and more intense. But I would say what needs to be done is clear to me. I mean, what we need to do is clear. And it's clear because we're not doing a lot of stuff. That's one of the problems. It's, the roads, they need repair. The sewers, in Oakland, we need another 60, 70 million to fix up the sewers. Well, then we're not doing it because where are you going to get the money? Nobody wants to pay for it. I just noticed the other day they have a report that our satellites that monitor the Earth systems that tell us about the weather and the impact on ocean and all the real basis of living and how human beings are impacted. Those satellites are aging, and there's nothing in the pipeline to replace them at the level required. So in many ways, we're exhausting the thrust that a great power requires, or a great state. And that's going to require more sacrifice, more discipline, more saving, and more investment. And it's not clear how we're going to get there.
Well, one of the opportunities which might help us get there is China and Asia. And you're going to be reopening a California-China trade office. The Bay Area Council is fully invested and engaged in China, especially in the Shanghai area. It has that growing market, even though it's a lot smaller than the U.S. market, has potential for both the U.S. as a whole, us regionally here in the Bay Area and locally. So how do you see the future of California and international commerce?
Well, I see it as a major major opportunity on the coast. We're poised to certainly seize the advantages of the Pacific. And China certainly is the powerhouse. India's in a different way, but also highly significant. So yes, we are going to open an office. I think the Bay Area Council is going to pay for it, so that's I like that.
Tell that to Jim Wonderman.
Well, no, because we don't need. We want private sector. We don't want some civil servant to be telling us how to do business in China. I think we want some people who do business in China and who know how to do business. That's the goal, to get the Chinese investing here and the American producers selling over there. So yeah, we're looking at that. I've met with Vice President Xi. When he came here, he's reputed to be the next president, and he reminded me, which was good, I'd received his father when I was governor the first time. So there's a lot of advantages for being around. So I'm gonna really go in to see the president when I get there and renew our collaboration.
Well, we want to thank you very much. We have to move on in the schedule, but obviously you're well received by your constituents here, at least in this theater, and I want to thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.